So now we're going to move into our final panel for the evening. So it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Utsav Mathur, who's going to be moderating the second panel. Utsav, hello there. He is an architect and technologist known for his pioneering research and work in the rapid construction industry. Utsav is the founder and CEO of GMetri, a virtual reality platform doing groundbreaking work across industries like training, skilling, and retail. So Utsav, I would like to hand over the mic to you to introduce our distinguished panelists and carry it through for the second panel of the evening. Utsav.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Eric. Thanks. Yes, Amit.
Just a technology check. I and Eric will just log off now. So from an audience perspective, there might be a lot of people in the panel here, but audience can see only the 4 of you who will be on the panel. So from our perspective, we will just be on the back end, and I, Mr. Mistry, and you will be able to do that. And we will just log off, and over to you, Utsav. And
thank you so much.
Power packed next session.
And as we, thanks so much for that wonderful discussion that I'm following up on, Amit, and you know, thanks Eric, of course, for the introduction. We have architect Peter Rich, we have Jimmy Mistry, and we have you know, Mr. Ratan Tata, all of them over here. I'd request you to please you know, unmute yourself, please come online, please you know, essentially just yes. Hi Peter, I can see you. And hello, sir. It's such an honor. Hello. So, good morning. I'm going to start off. I mean, I've been tasked right now by Eric to do the, you know, with the impossible, essentially introducing people who need no introduction. But thankfully, there are a few things that I will be able to pull up. For example, we've got a lot of architects, a lot of people from the design community on the audience right now, and very few people actually know that Ratan Tata sir is a trained architect. Not only that, he's been on the jury of the Pritzker for you know, so many times, sir. It's an absolute honor having you over. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of virtual applause kind of ringing across the entire country and of course the entire world, as we have over 5,000 people attending this. We are past the limit. We're spilling over to Facebook Live. So for those of you who are having friends asking in that they're not able to join, please join us on Facebook Live. The link is available via email. It's been emailed to everyone. Please join us over there. Just going to very quickly, you know, run a quick introduction, of course, of architect Peter Rich, who's from South Africa, South African architect. His work is very closely linked to the communities. His work actually grows out and empowers a lot of people, empowers the community from the ground up. His bottom-up approach to culture is something, and his work in South Africa resonates very well with what we face here in India and what we do over here in India. And he has a very good understanding of the entire Indian subcontinent. So we're really looking forward to your valuable insights. Yeah, I also have with me Mr. Jimmy Mistry, and I think it's really amazing to have you here as well. You're of course the MD of Della Group. And an authority in basically tourism in the hospitality industry, and also as a designer who's evolved and done such amazing work bringing history, contextualizing it with the buildings that embody storytelling within them. So I mean, I think it's really exciting to have you over here.
Thank you.
Yes, perfect. So I'd just like to kind of start out very quickly. The Tata sir, just coming to you, that I remember, you know, I picked up somewhere that you know you've said that architecture is a very satisfying profession, and that is something that you had wanted to do, and and one of the things that you'd wish that you'd done in an interview that I picked up. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yes, I always wanted to be an architect. Architecture interested me and motivated me. My father wanted me to be an engineer. I spent 2 years in engineering school, and it convinced me that I needed to be an architect, which is where my interest really lay. And of course, barring 2 years after I graduated, where I worked in an architect's office in Los Angeles. I spent the rest of my life outside architecture, but gaining greatly from the sense of humanism that architecture does render if you really get motivated with it. I've never regretted being an architect. I only regret that I'm not able to practice. But the sensitivity that you create as an architect, the ability to put things together, the ability to run a project on the basis of a budget, the intricacies of different materials coming together, all of those things are well taught in an architectural curriculum. And anyone that says that you wouldn't be equipped to do business as an architect would really not be a fair statement. I think it
Absolutely.
plays.
Absolutely. So, as in, like we like to say that there are no wrong answers in design. Like, unlike a technical education, there are no wrong answers. There are no right answers. So it's basically, within the gray areas that you have beautiful conversations with different things. So I really love that perspective. Thanks so much, sir. I want to start again with a question back to you. So, and I want to start off with a quote. And this is from Stuart Brand, and it goes like, "All buildings are predictions. All predictions are wrong." And this is, I think, one of the best times where that quote has actually been physically embodied in the times that we're looking at. The entire urban fabric, not just buildings, of course, as a whole, our predictions of our future, and our future has changed drastically, or at least in the near future, we're looking at a lot of changes in our lives. So that's something that's happening in these changing times. What is the relevance of architects? What is the relevance of designers and a design education?
This being addressed to...
Yes, sir. That's the questions for you, Tata, sir.
Well, I don't know how to address an answer to that.
So yes, sir. Let me very quickly kind of then ask you for the top 3 focus areas that designers can focus on today within these challenging times. What are the top 3 focus areas that you as a designer or designers in general or architects would be able to embody within their work? What is it that they can do?
Well, if we just go to affordable housing or we go to slum elimination, we're looking at 2 surprisingly conflicting issues. We're trying to remove slums from seemingly suitable living locations, moving those slums to another location 20, 30 miles away, where the jobs that people worked on are separated, and high value housing put in the place where the slums have been, and the slums being the residue, if you might. I say residue because you had a social structure in the slums, which is now changed to building a vertical slum, devoid of adequate fresh air, open space, hygiene conditions, etc. And the big gain is high cost housing that is put in the area that the slums are occupied. And I think what has happened in the Corona issue, that for the first time, the close proximity, low value structures that we have built are now very much the cause of new problem that the last few months have pointed out. And we're suffering from that close proximity, not enough fresh air, not enough open space, issues of being separated from your work considerably, moving. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, so I mean, this entire angle of how the disadvantaged have kind of been covered. I'd love a very quick perspective over here from architect Peter Rich. Of course, he's worked extremely, a lot with the disadvantaged, with the communities. What is your view on that matter, sir? And what are some of the top solutions that come out of it?
Well, I think we've got to prioritize the quality of human life over economic growth. There's actually got to be a shift. It's got to happen at government level. We've got to actually address the problem of the poor. And what the poor don't have is infrastructure. They can't supply the infrastructure. They can build better than we can, and very easily. And in Africa, I'm trying to address two things. One is we're trying to address first generation urban Africans. They're not used to being urbanized like you are. So how do you design environments with 4-story walk-ups where there's a benign transition between their culture and that new way of living so that there's a quality of life? And the second thing is we live in a country where we have 35% potential unemployment, especially with COVID-19. So what can you as an architect do to position yourself to give dignity back to those unemployed? And I'll talk later in the discussion about a program we're trying to set up to present to the president to enable that to happen. I think what I'm saying as an architect, you've got to become an activist. There are things bigger than you that you've got to be part of. And my plea is that we as humanitarians need to be part of discussions because it's not an engineering solution, it's a human problem. And we need to get together. We need to get together with engineers, we need to get together with developers, and we need to talk to one another because the answers are not easy. And we need to work and collaborate together. So it's interdisciplinary.
It's interdisciplinary. The answers are not engineering. It's not a problem that can be solved by engineering. It's a people problem. We're looking at people solutions. Coming over very quickly to you, Jimmy, sir, just very quickly, what are the top three? I know a lot of your work also has been focused on the community at large. Would you like to throw some light on that? And again, I'd ask you to also very quickly tell me what are the top three focus areas that people can look at?
So before I come to you on it, I would like to say something to Mr. Ratan Tata. Sir, I'm a huge admirer of yours. And I've really embodied and admired every single thing that the Tata Group, the Jamshedji Tata, JRD, and you stand for. Whatever you've done to the country is unparalleled. And we all salute you for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy.
So now I think it's a huge opportunity. And I agree with Peter that architects and designers, not only in India, but worldwide, need to stand up and start doing something which is human-centered. They have been practicing in the last couple of years. In the last 2 decades, we started talking of design thinking. We architects and designers need to self-learn the science of anthropology and get their focus onto human-centered design. That is going to be the key area that people are going to be looking for. Architects and designers need to be problem solvers. And post-COVID, the minute the markets open up, and during this phase when we are in lockdown, our human body, the biggest factories we have is our mind and our body. If we can go ahead and start planning how to do design-oriented solutions for the problems that we are having in our factories, in terms of social distancing, in our cafeterias, in our offices, how to convert small office, home office concepts which have been prevalent for 20 years but not really put to use. Now suddenly small office, home office in the last 4 weeks is the order of the day. And how can people convert without much of a retrofit? How can they convert their work environments at home with acoustical enclosures, privacy, some amount of automation? And how can they utilize their time most optimally with the right lighting and acoustics? So these are some of the things required in the commercial environments. Similar way we need to remodify it, and the way we look at our hospitals, the way we operate the lobbies of the hospitals, the way outpatient departments interact with each other. Everything, the science of design and design thinking has to be done, and we need to redesign so to speak, the entire world and keeping a human-centered approach.
We're looking at, I mean, that's very well put. Yeah, but yes, Peter, so you were saying something.
I want to make one other point. Nature has spoken to India. Okay? You've had 2 consecutive floods in Kerala. You've got people who can't breathe in Delhi. And the COVID-19 has got to do with breath. Breath has got to do with life. It's got to do with water. You've started to clean up your cities, but your rivers are filthy. You have belief systems that hold water sacred, and yet your rivers are filthy. You can go outside the temple and indoor, and you can look at a filthy river, even though the city's cleaned itself up. That affects health and safety. So it starts at that level, that we can't ignore these global disasters anymore that are talking to us. We have to address that because it has to do with health and safety. And then we can move on to the bigger issues.
That I think that makes a lot of sense, Ratan. So I'm going to come back and circle back to you with that. I think what we've heard from across the board is trying to implement a people-centric, put people first, the focus on people, almost have empathy for the people when we bring in the design processes. How do we do that as designers? How do we put people first at the center? How do we put people at the center of it all? That's a question that I would have for you, sir.
Who are you asking that of?
Mr. Tata, that question is for you.
If the question's for me, I agree with what you've said. I mentioned a little while ago that we did design for high value housing, and we provided in the slums the residue. It's like you asking a question of any person, would he be able to live in the environment that we create for low-cost housing? Would we be fair to the occupants? Would we be fair to the lifestyle, hygiene, etc.? Are we proud of what we've done? And I would feel, in keeping with what Mr. Rich said, we should be ashamed, because we have the image we want to project of ourselves, and there's the part that we want to hide. And we are offended when people criticize it, but we have a social responsibility as architects or developers to do something that we're not ashamed of, that we don't go behind closed doors, that we have people who live on top of each other in a manner of speaking, who have nothing, no fresh air to live in. It's just a space and an excuse for a source of living done through corruption and coercion. This is what we as architects and developers have been satisfied to do. And I think the Corona issue is a wake-up call of what beholds us. If that's what our concern is, it turns around and bites us back.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Jimmy, so I'd love a little bit of your perspective on that, on the entire, the people-centric or the anthropological, aspect of this entire thing.
See, today the biggest challenge across the nation for our beloved Prime Minister, who's been able to lock down a country of 130 crore population very successfully, is the slums. And that remains as a grave concern for the administration, how to contain this disease within the slums, like Mr. Tata pointed out, where there is hardly any fresh air, there is no space for ventilation, it's close proximity to each other. The density is as high as 1,200 people per acre. which is astonishingly higher than most slums across the world. That's the status of Dharavi as on today. In the 525 acres, they've got density of almost 1,200 people per acre, which gives about 36 square feet per person roughly. And that's an impossible task to deal with. Now, slum redevelopment is the need of the hour. It may not be in an absolute short term in the next 3 months, but subsequent to that, if the policies are not changed even now, Slum Redevelopment Authority has been struggling since the last 25 years, and they've been able to redevelop only about 17-18% of the slums in the city of Mumbai. And for the kind of development they've given and the life quality of human life they've given is for all to see, where design has played no role. Now, if things have to change, there are 2 parameters that need to change. And unless that doesn't change, even now slum redevelopment will be a nightmare and will never be implemented. I couldn't agree more with Mr. Tata when he said that you are only mitigating the problem by picking up people from the slum, taking them 30, 40 kilometers or miles away, and then asking them to travel back to work every day. That's not going to work out. The only way it's going to work out is if you rehouse them along with the new developments right in the same areas, get it into a mixed-use development, and then it can work out. But there are 2 aspects to it, and the biggest aspect why slum redevelopment has been unsuccessful within the context specifically to Maharashtra. And if Maharashtra does it well, because we've got 1,500 slums in Mumbai, the same concept can be replicated across the country. Most critical element that Slum Redevelopment Authority does, which is not done anywhere in the world, the societies that are formed out of these slum dwellers are then asked to deal with the developers directly. Now, this is the game changer. If the slum dwellers are made to deal with the SRA directly, and only a tender is taken out for the developer, that becomes a game changer where everything else changes. The so-called activists don't get into the picture, litigations come to an end, and the developer, the best professional developers will want to pitch into slum redevelopment and take up because it's an open tender. This way we'll be able to rehouse using the best architects in the world, give the respect to humans who deserve it. And this human capital, which consists of almost about 13 crore of the country's population living in complete slums, in a dignified life and a new beginning for our country.
I absolutely, that's a point that's extremely well put. And I'd take the question now to Architect Peter Rich, because I know there's a lot of work that you have done along that. So can we have your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to thank Jimmy for articulating that very well, and also Mr. Tata. This idea of dumping people miles from where their work is not tenable. The solution needs to be where they are, close to work. And it's interesting that the French President Macron is the one leader in the world at the moment who's talking the same language that we're talking today. He's saying you need to, the old capitalist order is dead. We need to actually look at human capital, and we need to actually turn around. We need to restructure the way we think about things. And this is what the debate is all about. Also, I'm an advisor to certain East African cities. And, you know, Africa's developing in 15 years what took 150 years to happen in the rest of the world is happening in Africa with all the mistakes and some of the good examples. So we're trying to learn. And what we're saying is the poor need infrastructure. They haven't got the infrastructure. They also know how to build. So what we're trying to do is provide infrastructure, and in some case provide 4-story walk-ups, which is a frame structure, and then you let the people actually move in and finish off their home. But what you do is you give them the spaces between, you give them the public realm, you give them, they have a sense of community, and it's deeply rooted in their culture. Don't leave culture out of the equation. Culture is very, very important. The puja is present in a Hindu's house. Those things comply. And there's got to be an intermediate way where you can use the human resource of those people to finish off and build their houses once you've actually given them the structure to work within. It's what I'm trying to work with in East Africa. And what we're also trying to do is give dignity back to people. We have a program in Africa, which I'm part of at the moment as an architect, where we've got something like 40% of our population potentially unemployed under the age of 35. So what we're actually doing is we're proposing that they get conscripted into the military. The military employs them to be trained in agriculture and in manufacture, so you can give them some dignity back. We're about to make a presentation to our president. And that's where I'm saying you as an architect have got to shift your worldview so you can engage with the bigger picture. And it needs the architect present at these aren't engineering solutions. It needs the architect and the humanist present at these discussions, whether it's at every level, where there's structural municipalities, this business of disaster relief. They're not engineering solutions, they're human problems. And I think Mr. Tata has made the point very well that the human component of the training of an architect is profound. And I think it has to do with collaboration. I want to cite, I'm a proud member of Savita College of Architecture and Design based in Chennai. It's a leading medical school and engineering school in the world. They're consulted by Harvard. They've supported the establishment of an architectural discipline within their university because they believe the environment is important. It's where preventative health and families start. And it's an incredible Indian initiative. It started with 10 students. But when I gave a lecture there, the vice chancellor and the chancellor came to my lectures. It's unheard of in the world. I don't know where else that would happen. So that's where the institutional frameworks are waking up to the fact that we need to partner with the right people to have the right outcomes. And on the slum clearance thing, it's not, we don't know the solutions, the ephemeral city, but we need to all get together. Jimmy needs to get together. I need to have a discussion with him. And the previous panel needs to have a discussion. We need to actually move forward collectively, thinking and having workshops. I'll cite another example. I'm fellow at Arkansas University in America. The university got together and said, why don't we get developers, good architects, and the public, and actually have a workshop to see that we get the right outcome to serve communities. And suddenly you had developers who had never spoken to good architects and never questioned who the user was, coming up with solutions that they would never have come up with. So again, it has to do with this collective getting together with good people to make decisions.
Absolutely, I think that's beautifully put, and that draws a lot of perspective. What I'm hearing is, of course, we need to, of course, collaborate, work with each other. The education system needs to come in. We need to be talking to each other to kind of rise over it. But also, I think a beautiful point that you brought forward is that the community has of its own accord a lot of things that are intrinsic to the very nature of our culture and the way we live. The Poles in Gujarat, for example, are such a great example of that. So what now, seeing that these communities already have such resilience almost ingrained into them, Ratan Tata sir, I would like to take the question to you, that seeing that this is already there, where is the systemic shift, or what should the government or the rest of the bodies, how do you empower this entire feeling, this entire community to be able to rise above the problems and the challenges that we have? What should the government do?
I think there should be a re-examination of what we would consider to be acceptable standards in terms of quality of life. It seems to stop at the areas with the slums are being replaced, and I use the word again, the residue is the slum. It's like putting the garbage together and calling it a community, pushing it 20, 30 miles out into the boondocks, making it difficult to survive, controlled by slumlords, etc. So perhaps there ought to be a revision in terms of the fact that we are dealing with communities, we're dealing with a part of our population that wants to be part of new India. And we as architects and developers are dodging that issue. We are creating a community or communities which we are ashamed of. We should be really driven by a desire to be proud of what we do, even if it's low cost or affordable housing. It creates a world culture, it creates the usage of space, etc., fresh air. All of these things, I think, are what needs to happen at the start.
That's beautifully put. That's beautifully put. And I'd just like to go over now to Jimmy very quickly, sir. I'd love to kind of hear from you about how this entire shift can happen. What are the things that we can do to empower it as a system? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, like I said earlier, this one particular thing, if the government can do somewhere from the center, is to make sure that the redevelopments are entered into partnership with societies. And if this law gets changed, everything else, all redevelopment will happen at a breakneck speed based on the economic condition of the country. Also, the center government needs to release a substantial amount of money. Today, slum redevelopment projects are stuck because of extensive want of capital. And that's a fact. And if we want slums to move and better quality of life to be given to our fellow countrymen, we need to really make provision for those amounts. The other most critical element is somewhere in India, we have this mindset and we are stuck with FSI of 3, 4, and CRZ norms. We haven't still managed to deal with these three things in the last 30 years. Unless and until places like Manhattan has got 35 FAR, places like London have got various multiple FARs based on the elevation designs of the building and the architectural fabric of that area. Now, unless and until we are not willing to make these changes in our DC rules, we will not really see change. Subsequent to COVID, we've realized, every human being has realized who's been put in a small 1-bedroom apartment or 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, how important the balconies are to us. I'm ashamed to say that even today in our DC rules, we've got no approvals for elevation design. We have no approvals for compulsory air conditioning ducts. Air conditioning is a necessity. I'm talking anything from middle class housing and above, air conditioning is a necessity. But yet buildings are approved without air conditioning ducts across. With the result, you have AC units lying on elevations and fascias of buildings, thus causing a health hazard. Now, there are multiple things which are very, very minor but can impact human lives in a better way. And it is time for us to relook at it and how can we really improvise it. It's also time to give its due importance to the design fraternity and community. I think in our country, we paid peanuts and got monkeys in terms of designers to a great extent, and that's been the status. If you look at government projects, things are changing. Yes, we are all very hopeful, and I'm one of those pessimist guys who's always hopeful for a bright, beautiful India that we are proud of. And like Mr. Peter said, that yes, we should not be ashamed of the way we are treating our rivers. Also the dumping of the raw sewage across into the sea. Things that should have been done 20 years and 25 years back, we are now putting plans into action. We are already working with the government of Maharashtra. Already we've started with the talks with our tourism minister Aditya Thackeray to see how post-COVID we can pump up tourism, that we are going to lose business, how we can pump up tourism. We are going to engage with companies like IDEO Design to see how we can do quality tourism for the state of Maharashtra. Thomas Heatherwick, we're picking up the best brains in the world. Also, we are contributing and making our government partners to the thought process to make sure whatever unemployment happens, we use these creative techniques, don our design thinking hats, and try and get multi-skilled labor back and give them jobs.
Yeah, very good.
Absolutely, Mr. Peter Rich. I'd just like a few of your thoughts on that, because again, right, what is the systemic change that kind of comes in? There are a lot of things that you've done historically and that you've proposed and suggested. What are some of the quick things that we can do in that?
Well, the first thing is it's important to talk to community and make community part of what you're doing, okay? Because it's for them. And believe you me, the social structures and that exist within squatter environments is amazing. How they organize themselves, given they have these even though they have these inequalities, I know Doshi always draws one's attention to the fact that if there's a fire and children lose their parents, the community takes care of those parents. They don't just get fostered out. In other words, there's an incredible care that takes place, and it's got to do with sense of community. The sense of community is there. What we design has just got to enable, not disenable, so that we can actually be proud. It's got to enable cultural norms, and it's got to enable more breathing space, and and it hasn't got to be high density. It can be 4-story walk up at a certain density. But if it's got the quality of open space in and around it, where you can breathe and 2 faces of your apartment can actually have fresh air, you're actually starting to win.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we need to learn from like Mexico. Mexico, people build on the fringes of Mexico. They have rooms that are 4.5 by 4.5, and they build incrementally. Architects seem to have a problem with building incrementally. The people actually have the answers, and the solution and the philosophy is in the problem, which is your Indian problem. You can lead the world in solving this. We've just got to have the right team, the right capacity, and get the government to make the structural changes to be enabling that Jimmy talks about. And then we can actually put minds together, and we can actually, with the community, come up with something that works. I mean, we had Charles Correa. I use Charles Correa as a Bible because his analytical thinking is just so sound. There's all the urban complexity. There's all the delight. There's everything implicit in his work. We've got all the lessons. We just need a chance to apply it and believe in yourself. And I go to India to be healed. I go to India because there's a gift exchange that happens. And I want Indians to believe in their Indianness. Stop trying to look for answers somewhere else. The answers are embedded in your own culture, and you can lead the world in these things.
The answers are there in our own culture, and I think that's extremely well put. I'd love to now transition to the next set of questions around the entire urban fabric, and basically how all of the things that kind of came up before are going to eventually impact the way that everything works. One of the themes that, of course, we've noticed across the entire board is how work from home has almost become a norm. And for cities like Bangalore, where a majority of the floating population, of course, has realized that they can work from home, that would have a tremendous impact on, of course, the cities. How does the city change? What are the things that now we have to rethink because of this? Mr. Tata, my question is to you. What do we have to rethink in terms of the entire urban fabric?
That's a little difficult for me to address. I think Mr. Peter Rich touched on it. We have to consider this issue as being our problem, not their problem, that we don't need to deal with. We need to concern ourselves with the quality of life everywhere, not only in the communities we occupy, but everywhere. And we have to ask ourselves, are we ashamed of what we see, or are we proud of what we see? And are we giving people what they need to have, or are we giving them what we want them to receive and have done with it? We need to consider urban communities as one. It's not a slum that he goes through in the night. In the morning, he's part of an office culture that he's wearing a tie and a white shirt, and he's playing a role, but he goes back again to an area that we feel ashamed. We need to get over that. We need to look at the possibility of ownership of slums rather than rental. A question of being proud of what you have. So I find it difficult to give a definitive answer, except a feeling from the heart that that we need to be ashamed of what we're doing, and we need to considerably focus on becoming proud of what we are doing and making it a showplace rather than something that you need a foreign filmmaker to bring out into the open and generate discord amongst ourselves. We need to be proud of what we do. And Bombay and Maharashtra need to be proud of what the transition that they make. But that transition has to be real, not fakey or superficial. I'll stop there.
No, I think that's such a valid point over there. The transition in terms of how we're kind of going in has to be led from the front. Jimmy, I'm going to bring you very quickly on. Let's actually shift things out a little bit. We've spoken a lot about slum rehabilitation. We've spoken a lot about how we're going to do these changes. Let's focus on something a little different, right? You're working from home. How is it? How are you collaborating with the rest of your team? How has that worked out for you so far? So, is there anything new? Is there something that's going to carry on forward?
So I think it all began with bang on like a tsunami. All of us didn't know what was happening. And the only thought process that we were hardwired to think of is what's going to happen to our people, our businesses, and how are we going to pull through this? So that was I think, the first week it sunk in. And very quickly, the second week onwards, we started making preparations and we started debating and discussing worst case scenarios, what's going to happen. And now I think all of us are in our heart of heart, having a very frank and open discussion with our teams. And I think that's the order of the day, communication throughout the organization. We are in hospitality and we have close to about 1,650 people between our 6 resorts. So we've had a very, very transparent conversation that this thing is going to be nothing less than a 6-month period. The first 3 months is going to be an absolute lockdown. And subsequently, we will be able to restart and kickstart our operation. Suggestions are coming in from even the junior-most people. What are the new things we should do? We are an experiential hospitality company, so we always are trying to innovate, put on our design thinking hats and innovate new experiences for people so that there is something for everybody to do at all points in time. So these are difficult times, but we've also learned new methods of working and collaborating. I would like to add over here, within the fraternity of design, architects and designers, architects in India were already used to collaborating to some extent. But the interior design community has never been collaborating together. Each one of us come up with some domain expertise. Globally, designers and architects and interior designers collaborate, and they each come with specialized skill set and work on projects together. Hence, they've been already used to working on projects sitting far off. And most of these practices have been used to working globally. Indian design practices, very, very few practices, literally you can count them in single-digit numbers who are doing global practices. So this is a good time for our Indian design industry to leapfrog, take advantage of collaborative tools that are available online, and leapfrog literally to the next level, wherein these design practices then become capable of not only working remotely within India, but also, like Peter keeps saying, that Indians can do a lot of problem solving globally, and these design practices can then go out and look for the jobs they've lost over here, go out in the world and pick up jobs and projects across by collaborating with each other, learning from each other. I think there's a time for the entire design fraternity to put that reset button and recalibrate. Learn, relearn again post-COVID era.
Absolutely. Ratan Tata, so you've also been, you really look at a lot of new solutions, new technology solutions that are out there. What are the top solutions that have become very, very relevant post-COVID? What are the top technological solutions coming from startups, coming from the entire world of technology that would gain impetus over the coming few years?
Well, I think the happenings of the last few months have or should have been, as I said earlier, a wake-up call for what we were not doing, the concern we were not having, the issues that we shoved under the carpet around us. I think all of those, we have in the last few months I would say we have been humbled as a set of communities. We've been humbled to realize that a disease could run across the globe, totally changing the dimension of how we live and what we do, the cleanliness of of the lifestyle that we have, the interaction we have with each other, and how we choose to have differences that are so enormous that we talk of isolating ourselves to survive. I think the time has come that a bunch of like-minded people should sit down and be self-critical in terms of what we have ignored doing over a period of time, because there will be other calamities that will keep hitting us. We need to be prepared to reconstruct ourselves as we go forward.
Absolutely. It's been a time to rethink, to look back, to basically see what we can do better and how we can grow over these years. And I think a lot of very, very interesting the thought processes I think have come as a result of this. I'm really thankful that we're having to discuss such topics within this entire time. We're having to kind of do an entire rethink on what we're looking at the future at. My next question is to Peter, and essentially what I want to ask you is, I know you collaborate a lot with teams across the world. You work with a lot of global teams. How has the entire remote collaboration worked? How is it impacting the industry? Is there something that has changed in the very processes of how you work? Are you seeing any impact over there?
Well, I think, sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
No.
Okay. I think what's happening is we are for the first time looking at how we live and how we operate remotely. In some businesses, the IT business, for example, I think it's quite feasible to work remotely. For most of us in the smokestack industries, we need a physical presence. It's difficult to adapt, but we will need to adapt. We'll need to ask ourselves, is it impossible to work remotely, or can we become comfortable with what we have to do in order to do this? I think it calls for some fresh thinking, no holds barred in terms of how we live and how these changes will impel us and compel us to look at things again.
Absolutely. And it's so many, there's such a paradigm shift in the very way we need to address all of these problems. I think that's tremendous. Peter, I just want to come back to you with that question one time and see your thoughts on that.
Well, it's unprecedented that half the world has stopped and is working from home. So things we've taken for granted, we started to relook at. I've worked from home for 35 years. My office faces the street and my house faces a piece of paradise we've built at the back. So I'm very used to the concept of working from home. But suddenly we value our culture, we value one another. We suddenly we've become like what peasants used to do. The food that you eat more economically. You as husband and wife are part of that food. You're part of the creation of that food, things you took for granted. And one's become far more nurturing. of friends and positioning yourself in the world. From a business point of view, we're actually working a lot more efficiently. We're involved in 2 paid-for competitions, which we have cash flow problems, but we'll overcome those. But we're finding that the interactive process internationally is working incredibly well. And I've got 2 sons who are architects, and one of them helped me get my Zoom sorted out, so I'm acquiring new skills. But all in all, I think it's really good for people to be at home. I've got Indian interns who are suddenly saying to me, you know, you spoke about us actually revering our culture and revering where we come from. They're suddenly understanding the value of what they'd ignored, be they Muslim, be they Hindu, be they whatever. They're actually seeing the value of that within the context of their homes. And it's just simple values that one starts to get in balance again, because we got so out of balance in being too busy to be able to give the attention and time to the important things in life. And I hope a place like Bangalore, I've been to Bangalore and it's sort of strangled itself with traffic. I hope you've got to go to Mysore to sort of understand what Bangalore used to be like. Maybe Bangalore can stabilize and become the place it was, because you haven't got everybody commuting to work.
Absolutely. I mean, that's going to be such a massive impact. Now, most people in Bangalore, again, supported by the IT industry, people are going to, move out of it. So, I mean, I think we've established that there are going to be significant shifts in the way that you work, in the style of your work. So, how are these going to change the way that our cities are designed? Now, let's say we were to design something going forward, or the way the cities have to be rethought. There are a lot of these design, things around design that we were taught, or that we are taught currently in design schools, that are no longer relevant. I mean, I just want to take one example, like when you were taught to design bars as a student, you were told that, okay, make the entry spaces small because it makes you brush against people, make closer to the entire to everybody else. And now I think that's not relevant anymore, right? So a lot of things are changing. We're changing the way we work. We're changing the way we live. What are those changes? I mean, what are the things that are going to change in the entire city and the way we design? What is that paradigm shift? This question is open to anyone who wants to take it.
Well, ironically, several years ago, long before our present situation, I attended a lecture from a professor from Princeton who was talking about what's happened in New Jersey with people working from home. A whole lot of office complexes downtown have become redundant. And what they've done is they've had to turn them into urban farms, floor by floor, gut them out, and look for a complete new use for them, because they're not rentable anymore. So those are the radical changes that are going to happen. And I mean, there we have a precedent, okay, pre-COVID. So that's
Absolutely.
The level of thinking. It's not going to be, yeah.
So like,
it's urban farming. Yes, Jimmy, over to you. Urban farming has come out. What are the other solutions that we can see?
So like Mr. Tata said, that there are 2 kinds of works, and in India,
I can't hear you.
about 70-30 ratio, where 70% of the people cannot work out of their homes because their factories demand them to work within the factory, or they are into agriculture and they need to be on the farm. However, the remaining 33% of the population, I guesstimate there is going to be reverse migration. And these are the times where we will be seeing a reverse migration curve jump up, because people will understand that the quality of life within the urban contextual meaning that they're dreamt of, they're not getting. And now the quality of life and the means and communication has really improved in the rural areas from where they come from. And with the new skill sets they've acquired in these urban areas, if they take them back to the rural areas, they may be able to perhaps earn more than what they're struggling here and earning. At the same time, things will change within the real estate segment. We will see a shift across in the mindset of people. For those people within the IT industry and back office areas who can work from home, will definitely be opting for a little larger apartment, because now they know that the apartment is not just a office within a home, it's a home within an office. And if that's going to be their career, there'll be a complete recalibrated shift in the mindset of people. There's going to be recalibrated shift in the purse and the wallet spending of people. and all of us cannot really pinpoint, calculate what's going to be the outcome, but we can make suitable guesstimations. I completely agree with Peter that in India, the only real estate that was doing good was a commercial one. Now it's going to be also under deep stress. And what other applications can they make of those huge large spaces and floor plates that have been created is going to be for all to see. Some are very preliminary stage, talking about using it for health, which is the next big thing across. And there is definitely a more amount of importance in every human life being given to the health of people. And let's see what really changes for the country. But it is definitely time for designers to recalibrate and get ready as problem solvers.
You made a very strong point. Yes.
Sorry. No.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I've got work in China, and I've taught my client to draw so that on WeChat we can communicate as designers. And he's become my pupil. So suddenly I have a different relationship. I have a much better relationship with the client because the client's part of the process. And I think this can lead to that.
Since Peter mentioned about the China example, very often I've seen large factories and residential accommodation of workers all within the same campus and the complex. I think that is going to be the new need of the hour. And a lot of companies and factories that are going to plan to restart is going to be insisting for accommodation of the labor, especially if Corona is going to reoccur. We all need to recalibrate and think how we can have our manual labor who's working at the factories and plants and warehousing stays within the complex, and how can they come to work so our supply chain doesn't get disrupted.
And the other thing you need to do in India is you have the advantage, unlike America, where, you know, labor at $150 an hour, you can't employ labor. Your monetary system militates that you actually have high embodied energy in everything you do. You have the advantage that you can engage natural materials. You can engage cultures that are used to making things, and the world wants to see that you have this advantage that you have this incredibly skilled labor force, and you need to do it. Sankalpa at CEPT has been investigating high-rise buildings using steel, bamboo, and materials that are natural materials, not just concrete. So you can lead the world in that because you actually have this unbelievable skill. And if you can transfer these cultural skills that are done for into materials that can actually be of sustainable use, you have an incredible advantage. So stop looking abroad. The gold is in your hands. It's all there right with you. And you have this financial advantage that you can use labor. A lot of the work I do is creating jobs for unemployed. You have a similar situation. It's a very, very different paradigm.
Absolutely. The focus is shifting back to skills. At GMetri, we focus a lot on reskilling and working with a lot of people over there. Mr. Ratan Tata, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on this. Is reskilling going to be the new norm? Is that something that we need to do? Because we're looking at, like Jimmy said, do you agree with that there's going to be a reverse migration, a deurbanization of sorts, and people will need to now find new ways of finding work? Is that something that we would look at? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
My view is that it's not an issue one size fits all. Different work cultures, different businesses will call for different assimilation of the communities. But what we should be doing is doing what fits us best and fits the situation best, and not forcing a lifestyle and forcing an aggregation of communities on each other. So it needs, we've called it recalibration, we've called it reconstruction. We need to do that, but in the context of where we want to go.
Absolutely, sir. I mean, that's a point so well put. I'm so sorry, but we're running out of time, and we need to kind of wrap this up very quickly. Ratan Tata, so I'm going to come to you for closing comments very quickly. What is it that what is one message? What is one thing that architects and designers can do today that would add value to the entire situation? What is one problem they can look to solve, or what can they change? Just a very quick closing comment on that, sir.
I think we should reorient ourselves to bring the occupant or the communities that are going to live in what we provide into the picture. I think Peter Ritz talked about them. It's an issue getting the key ingredient, the occupant or the community that is to be housed in these new cities, to be a part of the thinking and the creation of what we do, rather than giving them what we give them.
Absolutely, no cookie cutter modules for them. That makes a lot of sense. Over to you, Peter, sir. Just quick closing comments. What can an architect do today? What can a designer do today?
Well, I think it's inevitable certain people are going to work from home. But I think what's going to happen, homes are going to become multi-generational. And also, they're going to be children as part of the home. So you're going to need more space. We've separate areas for children so that you can coexist. And you can work, because we've always known the TV was an interruption. So you had like a family room. But that's going to be reconceived and have a look at, so you can live harmoniously together through different generations that are having to inhabit the same space. And
absolutely. Yes, Jimmy, so very quickly over to you. Closing comments. What is it that we can do today?
I think it's time where our architecture and design fraternity, architects of the nation, need to raise to the occasion and quickly recalibrate and just have one point agenda to kickstart the economy of our country back again and help with design. They become problem solvers, they become design solution providers, and help kickstart the economy to get back to its original potential, be it 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever time it takes. But this is the time period for the design fraternity to raise up and serve our country.
It's yes. Sorry.
I'd like to make one point. I've gone and interacted with a 20-something intern in India who sat down and critically tried to examine where he, as a young intern who's done 3 years of study, positions himself in this. And I've also got my sons who are 40-something to also write down. And I think we all need to do that. And Savita has set up a platform where it's got young graduate architects starting to talk to one another about the very issues we're discussing. And that hasn't happened before. And there's a critical need for it. And out of that is something substantial, because you can have a discourse between the teacher and who you're teaching, and saying, what do we need to focus on? And you think new about it, but at the same time, you mustn't forget to learn the grammar of the language of architecture, which is a human thing, and you must be good at it. You mustn't just go and do social architecture where when it comes to perform, you don't know how to perform. You need to speak the language of the architect. And especially when you're dealing with the poor, because the poor don't need second best. It's actually more challenging. And I just want to thank Jimmy and Mr. Tata for the privilege of being on the same panel with you, and for you sitting in San Francisco and putting this all together. I'm so sorry you're trapped there. You need to come home.
I'm trying. And yes, thanks so much for that. I think that was beautifully put. We shouldn't forget the grammar of the very language we speak as architects. That's important today. We need to collaborate. We need to speak with each other more and more. We need to kind of, just come together. And then right now, we're problem solvers. Before anything else, we're solving problems. We've on day 3 and day 2 of this, we're putting together a lot of solutions, which would try and answer how can we go in. We've of course heard a lot of those before from Peter. So we heard about how urban farming is going to become a thing, how we can take existing inventory and convert it into a farm. And there are a lot of ideas along that How are we going to build faster? How are we going to build with less materials? How are we going to change it? So there's a plethora of solutions out there. And during this series, we are going to be exploring more of those. But right now, I must take time to thank this beautiful amazing panel, and thanks so much for taking your time out. We've really we've had a large number of people. We've in a way broken the internet. We reached the limit of this of this webinar. We had to spill over to the next part. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I'd like to bring in Eric and Amit very quickly to take over for the closing note and comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a wonderful discussion, Mr. Tata, Mr. Eric, and Mistry. I think Utsav, you did a great job being a young entrepreneur. Hats off to you. Talking to the stalwarts of the industry. I would like to just make a very quick announcement, and I think in presence of Mr. Tata, that would be very, very important. That we are doing as a part of this initiative, donation to the PM Cares Fund. So whoever is attending this webinar, there is a link in the chat box. We will be also sending you the mail. Please feel free to donate, and all this money will go to the PM Cares Fund. So that was an initiative we wanted to take as part of this entire discussion, and we want the entire architect community to come together and build the next India. Eric, do you want to give the last thoughts or comments for the closure?
Sure. I just want to once again, thank you, Mr. Mathur, for being such a wonderful moderator and asking really thoughtful questions and having such empathetic responses. And Mr. Mistry, Mr. Rich, and Shri Tata, it's been a real honor. If I can just briefly echo some of the words we heard, we've just heard from, architects, developers, and business leaders talking about prioritizing humanity over economy. And this is a matter of choice. A choice that we can all make. We've all seen how the impact of COVID-19 has undoubtedly forced companies and communities around the world to begin drastically reshaping their operations and making some very tough decisions. Let us also leverage this experience as an opportunity. As you've heard from these distinguished panelists talking a lot about an opportunity to envision how the world is evolving and examining what role we want to play. So whereas the 2008 financial crisis opened our eyes to systemic risk in the financial markets, the coronavirus pandemic has reminded us how interconnected we all are. From industry, housing, and the economy to healthcare and the environment, our actions have significant and immediate impacts on our surroundings. So let us all hope and encourage that business executives and political leaders will take a step back and balance the interests of all stakeholders, companies, people, and the environment, so that together we can build a better world. So I will humbly speak on behalf of all of our attendees to thank once again all of the panelists and moderators who have generated their time to share a few words with us. Thank you all so much for joining. Please join us for the next 2 days at 11 a.m. IST. And I will just once again say Dhanyavad and Namaste.
Namaste. And just one last bit, that we have a lot of solutions, and we did talk about solutions. On the third day, we are only going to talk about solutions. We've got some 100-odd solutions from the various industries, designers, startups, which will be presenting, and we will just kind of position some of them to provide those solutions. I would like to end with a quote by Mr. Tata himself. He said that businesses need to go beyond the interest of their companies to the communities they serve. I think this is the time where businesses really need to go to the communities and serve them. Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Stay.